Moving on, we will be setting forth to our next session, which will be on the future of the profession and CA firms. We have with us a seasoned speaker and a seasoned chartered accountant of our fraternity, CAPR Ramesh sir. A warm welcome to you, sir. It is known that technology has changed every profession. The advent of computers, digitization, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and whatnot. Everything has changed everyone's work, which also needs that we have to constantly adapt ourselves to the changing technology. And to know about this and understand this, we have a dignitary here today, CAPR Ramesh, who is a former chairman of the Deloitte India and a former member of Deloitte Global Board with over 40 years of experience in the profession and a fellow member of the ICAI. He was a former member of the SEBI Committee on Disclosures and Accounting Standards and also a member of the working group set up by Reserve Bank of India for implementation of Ind AS by banks in India. He's been the past president of Bombay Chamber of Commerce and Industry and also the member of Accounting Standards Board of India, past member of the Secretarial Standards Board constituted by Institute of the Company Secretaries of India, and also lectured extensively in India, including programs conducted by the ICAI, Reserve Bank of India, the Confederation of Indian Industries, and abroad on a variety of subjects, including auditing and accounting subjects. Indeed, we are extremely happy to have you as our resource person today to know about what is the future of our profession post-COVID and also the future of the CA firms. Over to you, sir, to address all the delegates.
Thank you very much. Let me begin. I have a presentation. Let me begin by sharing the screen. 1 minute. Please bear with me for a minute. Is my presentation visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Chairman of Mangalore Branch, CA Nayak, office bearers and members of Mangalore Branch, and Central Council member, and my good friend Dayanivas Sharma. First of all, congratulations to you on crossing a very, very historic milestone of 50 years. I compliment the Mangalore Branch for the outstanding programs they've conducted over the years. I recall I was last at Mangalore in 2015. I don't know what topic I have to check back, but I do know that I've spoken at Mangalore, I've spoken at Udupi, and truly that is a region which is known for high intellectual ability. So it's an honor for me to be addressing all of you. Whilst the title of the topic is the future of the profession, I must again apologize here. Ideally, I should have titled it the profession of the future, because this sounds a bit negative when you say future of the profession. It almost tries to indicate that there is no future for the profession. I'm not trying to say there is no future for the profession, but definitely there are headwinds and we need to be mindful of those headwinds. I think some of the questions which all asked Mr. Pai, Mohandas Pai, in the earlier session were so valid and his answers so apt. Some of those I will also be in a way repeating or covering, but bear with me. I will take you through a presentation, but let me preface it by saying never before in my 40 plus years in the profession have I reached a conclusion and been in a situation where I feel that there is a concern about the future. There is definitely dark clouds, there are headwinds. If as a profession we do not read those signals, we don't read the tea leaves, and we don't address those challenges, I think we will have a serious issue with our profession itself. For no fault of ours, except the fault being that we are failing to read the signals and not adapting to change. You know, it is human nature to be to be operating in a comfort zone. It is human nature to extrapolate the most recent and say, yeah, this is what it is. It is human nature to think that nothing will change. I still recall about 20 years ago, around maybe 18 years ago, I was in a program in Bangkok, in an international program. There was a speaker there. His name was Wolfgang Grülke, and he had written a book called 10 Lessons from the Future. And his book was a very fascinating book, but he was a great speaker there. And he went on to push us to imagine what the future would be. And I can tell you in 2002, when I started in that conference, in that 1 hour, where we each one of us had an opportunity to speak about the future of the profession or future of services, none of us, I can tell you, not a single person could predict the situation as to what it is today. And it has got nothing to do with COVID. Mind you, our future is the dark clouds or the headwinds are not because of COVID-19 or Corona, as the case may be. It was even before that. So if you had asked me to speak on the future of the profession before that, my presentation perhaps would have been the same. I have done this earlier. I've done it in several places across several branches of ICI, including branches overseas, whether it's Dubai, Abu Dhabi, etc. I've been speaking on this for the last few years to say that we need to be alert to the future. And the biggest danger for everybody is status quo. They expect status quo and believe that status quo will continue. And that is the single biggest failing of individuals who are not will not succeed, because they never, as I said, smell the coffee which is brewing and adapt themselves to it. That is the challenge. So what are those headwinds? What are those challenges? Let's start looking at them. Nobody, including me, can predict the future. All I can tell you is these are the headwinds. Now, supposing you were to see bright sunshine, would you say there will be snowfall tomorrow? The answer will be no. But supposing you see dark clouds today, will you say there will be bright sunshine tomorrow? Highly unlikely. You will say it's going to rain, and you'll start preparing yourself for heavy rain. And even weather forecasts are on that basis. So the simple point I'm trying to make is, let's look at the winds which are blowing currently, and then analyze the wind to say, what does it mean for us? If this is true, what should we do as a profession? How do we prepare ourselves? And that's the same lessons for life itself. It has got nothing to do with just the profession. Every aspect of your life depends on your ability to read what is the current situation and extrapolate that based on your interpretation of the current situation into the future. This is not about reading horoscopes of either Bejan Daruwala or anybody else. None of those. It's not about stars. This is something completely different. So what does this mean? You look at, this is not my prediction. Even as early as 2013, look at this document, The Future of Employment. And what is the probability of job losses? The vulnerability of jobs to just one item, which is computerization. Low below, in the bottom, second last from down, is accountants and auditors. They have the highest probability, second highest probability of job losses. The least probability of job loss, rightly so, is dentists, recreational therapists, etc. Perhaps we haven't reached a stage where your dental treatment can be computerized, or your beauty parlors can be completely computerized and digital. We haven't reached at that stage, but that days too is not far away. And here you have accountants and auditors. Mohandas Pai remarked on this in a way. And accountants and auditors, look at the probability. So and this is in 2013. Nothing has changed. In fact, it has worsened, if at all. The probability has risen, and that it seems more certain now than even probable in a way. That is. Now, the next thing is, the simple question is, the type of work we do is all brain work. We use judgment, so many other things. What will computerization affect us? Look at the next one. The next one will show you, this is a picture from the Newsweek a few years ago. And that article had a title called Goldman Sacked. That's simple. Then it attracted my attention and I started reading the article. It was about Goldman Sachs New York office, where they had around, I think, 700 traders who are making millions or even billions for Goldman Sachs by trading in the New York Stock Exchange and trading in NASDAQ and other exchanges across the world. Now, what Goldman Sachs was able to do is develop algorithms and virtually automate their judgment. Now, these are people who are using instinct, judgment, whole host of things, looking at screens, looking at data, and then making millions or billions. Now, Goldman Sachs decided, fine, what is it they do? They are, at the end of the day, dealing with data, making judgments. What goes into human judgments? Finally, into human judgment is all about data, analysis of data and facts, and then humans judge on that basis. Now, that's exactly what you're saying. Supposing you look at me and I keep smiling on that all the time. I look vibrant and, shall I say, healthy. What would your impression be? Your impression would, you form a judgment that, yeah, Mr. Ramesh is a healthy person and a cheerful person. Do you know whether internally I have some dreaded disease? No. But you are forming judgments based on visible facts, and putting those facts together with your existing knowledge, you're arriving at a conclusion all the time. And we have so many situations where we jump to wrong conclusions. Supposing I enter a leading store in tatters, what would be the first thing that man will, if let's say I enter a Rolex showroom in tatters, do you think that man will believe that I'm capable of buying a Rolex? Will he take all the pains to show me a Rolex? He's going to throw me out in the first instance. Because based on visible facts, he concludes that I am not a customer who will buy a Rolex. Because I'm not wearing one, I'm in tatters, and I may not have the net worth to be able to buy one. So what Goldman Sachs did, when they were able to do this, they were able to bring down the jobs from 700, those traders, to just 2, and making the same amount of money. So 2 traders, and the rest of it is all automation, produce the same result or better results. So it is not that low-level people, low-level work has the threat of being lost. Everybody has the threat of being lost. Today we are in the midst of what is called the 4th industrial revolution. World over, this has been the buzzword. The World Economic Forum recently had a lot of discussions around the 4th industrial revolution. There have been multiple industrial revolutions. In fact, if you see mankind itself started from foraging to farming. And much later, you would find that they developed tools, and then the fire was discovered in a way how to make fire, and we changed their lives in terms of how they could heat up the food, roast the food, and then heat up. And of course, fire was used for various other purposes. But if you see the industrial revolutions, right from the time where electricity was discovered, or the power of the steam engine, and railroads were introduced. And railroads introduced changed the landscape across various countries. It changed the way trading happened, because goods could move from one place to another, people could move one place to another much faster than ever before. And that changed the nature of the economy. So that was one revolution. Then you had the automation revolution, where, which was in the early part of this early part of the 20th century, where you have assembly lines. If you see the Charlie Chaplin movie, The Modern Times, which is a 1934 movie, you will see Charlie Chaplin there on an assembly line. And that again transformed the way production happened. For World War I and World War II, mass production was capable because of an assembly line concept. It completely revolutionized industry, and that is why that is called the 2nd industrial revolution. The 3rd industrial revolution was after Charles Babbage discovered, or rather invented, the computers, and computerization happened, and big mainframe computers came in. Much later, of course, the laptops came in, or smaller versions came in. But there again, in my early career itself, when computers first came in, it itself changed the way we thought about things, the way accounting was shifting from pure manual records. In those days, we had the great people in demand were those who could write ledgers and cash books. They could have needed to have good handwriting. They had colored ink and colored pencils. Beautiful ledgers were written. And when computerization happened, all those jobs disappeared. There were comptists who used to add figures. When calculators came in, even those comptometers and comptists disappeared. When I first used to go for audit, I used to go along with a comptist. He used to add those huge numbers. In fact, as part of our training, we were asked to add the telephone directory. Where is it relevant today? How much has changed? So that was the third industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution is past this internet age, and what we are seeing now is the convergence of the physical world, the digital world, and the biological world. And that is producing a complete transformation across industries and services. All world, nobody is exempt from the fourth industrial revolution. What it means, how it will impact, we are still learning. It's phenomenal, and that's a different subject. It is not my subject currently. I can speak on that subject for hours, but the fourth industrial revolution is what we are today. And if this is the situation, we need to understand the present. What are the headwinds? What are those changes? What do they mean for us? And let's look at some of these. The first is the increasing globalization, though we are seeing currently a pushback insofar as globalization is concerned. Countries, even India has said Atmanirbhar, which was the question which was asked. But that doesn't mean that borders will be closed and there will be no cross-border trade. You will still find that the future will be that there will be cross-border movement of services. The whole developments in Gurgaon, Pune, Bengaluru, Hyderabad, Chennai, where thousands and thousands of companies are operating in the IT sector, IT and IT-enabled services sector, serving the rest of the world. Do you think with Atmanirbhar that will disappear, or everyone in the world says Atmanirbhar, that will disappear? No. In fact, banks, the top banks world over have outsourced a lot of their premium work to India. In the past, it used to be low-level work. Now it's high-level work where, in fact, decisions are taken and transactions executed from India. It is no longer just about recording and reconciling things. A lots are happening. So this sort of globalization in terms of cross-border trade, opening up of boundaries will continue to be there. Equally, what will happen is global standards. You will no longer find that you're operating on a standard which is different from the rest of the world. We in our country itself, when we say Bharat 6 is nothing but for the pollution is nothing but equivalent to a global standard. When we say Ind AS, we may call it Ind AS, but it is nothing but IFRS. Big time, almost equivalent to IFRS. So aren't we ourselves moved to a global standard? That is what I meant by increasing globalization. The distinction today in the marketplace between export business and domestic business is gone. You can't, when you're going to buy a car, an Indian car manufacturer is competing with global manufacturers in the Indian market. You and I will decide on a Maruti or a Toyota Kirloskar or an Ambassador or whatever it is, but all of these are domestic in a way because they are in the domestic market. All companies are operating from India and being sold in India, but the brands may be foreign. That's a different matter altogether. The point I'm still trying to drive home here is that distinction between local and foreign is increasingly blurred, because what is local and foreign? Is it what is foreign which is imported from abroad, or is what is foreign is a foreign brand name though it is made in India? So that blurring is happening, but the point I'm trying to make here is this is part of that increasing globalization. And then you get on to the 5 other things, which is the emergence of new industries and disruption of existing industries. You all know that today what is the most popular? We talk about the big 4 or the big 5 in the industry world, which is the Alphabet, which is the Microsoft, which is the Amazon, which is the Facebook. And look at them. They are bigger than many countries' economies. You talk of Airbnb, you talk of Oyo, you talk of Uber. Uber owns no cars, as they say, but yet it is one of the most successful companies. Or Elon Musk, Tesla. Tesla, the electric car, is it a car with a computer or a computer on wheels? You try and find out what it is. If you actually drive a Tesla, you will realize more and more that it is a computer on wheels, not a car with a computer. And what does it have? It just has a battery and significant computerization there, hugely digital. You can call for the car without being in the car. It will come to you where you're standing, and then you get in and sit down in the car. And then you're talking of many other things, which I'll come to when I talk of technology. But the point I'm saying is these business models themselves, where Uber has come in, or Airbnb has come in, which does not own any properties, but has perhaps far more accommodation available than many of the established hotel chains. And increasingly, businesses are very complex in their models themselves because of this. And additionally, we have the growing number of millennials in the workforce. At the end of the day, we all work with people. We deal with people. The millennials are a completely different breed of people, and I'll show you a slide on that as to the number of millennials. And then we will talk about technology and the evolving landscape. Look at millennials. They are 80 million in the US, 2.5 billion worldwide, even more, close to 3 billion perhaps now. They have a completely different mindset. And they are the ones who are born between 1980 and 2000. Look at them. They are highly technology driven. They are connected socially. They are the ones who don't mind changing jobs. They don't believe in possessing assets. Now, all of this means something for us as service providers. Here is a group whose mindset is different. Their needs are different. They will be the largest number of people as we go along. So even the nature of services or the manner in which the services are to be provided, their expectations will be completely different. This is yet another signal which we need to think of. Technology. Technology has pervaded everybody. Today you can't say I will not have a mobile, because anything you want to do, they'll ask you what is your mobile number. You will get an OTP, they'll say. Now, if you don't have a mobile, where will you get an OTP? How will you operate? Do you think life is easy? Absolutely difficult life which you are expecting. Now, when you're talking of technology, what has technology done? And I'll come to what technology has done before I just complete this regulatory landscape too. Increasingly new regulations, and some of the regulations are both an opportunity as well as a threat. Certain regulations will take away work. For instance, let me give you an illustration. Before India opened up in 1992, there was a license which was required if you needed to import raw materials, finished goods, any product for that matter. The government of India used to grant the importer a license based on, that license was called an actual user license, and it was issued based on the user's actual consumption certified by a chartered accountant. Now, I could import raw material based on a certificate given by chartered accountant of my consumption of raw material, of imported raw material in the previous year, which I would furnish to the government. They would then, on the basis of the certificate, issue me a license for import of raw material. So a CA certificate was required, and that was great business. We used to earn a lot of money as CAs by issuing those certificates. In came the liberalization. All of that disappeared. License Raj went away. And with the License Raj going away, there was that whole income stream of CAs disappeared. Now that's an example of a regulation which can take away your existing work. Imagine if regulations can take away your, say, for audit. Audit is a need because of a regulation. Whether it's the Companies Act which requires audit, let's assume audit were fully voluntary. How many would come to you and say, please audit my financials? That's a risk. Or if one were to pass a law to say audit is required only for companies with a turnover exceeding 1,000 crores, what happens to the whole audit market? what happens to you and me who have been in the audit profession for so many years. So regulation, it needs to be closely watched. Regulations are both an opportunity and a threat. And I'll talk more about that a little later. Now, technology. Technology has changed the way in terms of what we do, how we do, when we do, and where we do. Businesses may not have changed, but the technology with which, and as I said, with the fourth industrial revolution, it is even more stark. And why is this so? Because of several things. One, because of speed. Phenomenal speed of computers today, the speed at which we are talking about is a multiple of the speed which was just 30, 40 years ago. Several times a multiple. The change which we are talking in speed, in storage, in connectivity, and in sensors, just the four, is phenomenal. And when I say phenomenal, it is what we call exponential. What does exponential mean? Now, if let me give you a story there for exponential. This is the story of a man who invented the chessboard. Now, the king was very impressed when it was presented to him with this game of chess and the chessboard. He wanted to reward that man. So he asked that man, what do you want? So that man said, my lord, just give me 1 grain of rice for the first square of the chessboard, twice that number for the second board, that means twice will be 2, twice that for the third, and that will be double of 2, which is 4. And he says so on for all the 64 squares in the chessboard. The king, being ignorant, he said, oh, is that all what you want? You shall have it, and ordered his ministers to fulfill his desire of the grain of rice, doubling at each square on the chessboard, not realizing that if you double 64 times, you will reach a fancy number of 1 quintillion, that is 1 followed by 18 zeros. All the granary in the kingdom was not adequate to fulfill that man's need. The king couldn't gift because his calculations were all wrong. So the way you have the Moore's law and the Crider's law, which Moore said the storage will double, with the number of components in a chip will double each year. And it was expected to last for 7 years. It's continuously happening today. The costs which are going up, they're going down, the capacity which is going up is unbelievable. The first computers in 1956 when IBM shipped were the size of 2 refrigerators, and there was just 56 MB. Today we are not talking of MB, we are talking a GB is 1 GB is in a small chip, which our mobile phones have a huge storage. I still remember in the 70s when I used to go for audit of a company, its computer section or division was one huge building with all spools there, air conditioning, you have to leave your footwear outside. Today, my laptop is more powerful than that huge building filled with computers. That is exponential change. And do you think this change will not continue? It's continuing even now, that Moore's law and the Crider's law, both in terms of speed and of processing and the volume of storage, is unbelievable. Surely that must mean something for our services. It must mean something for businesses and how we function. Aren't we today so different? And I'll come a little later again to how it impacts the profession. But the fact of the matter, you must remember, speed, storage, connectivity, where today you've got huge bandwidths across. The very fact that we are able to have this program, despite all this corona, is the fact that there is bandwidth, there is technology, there is speed. I'm able to share a presentation almost like as if I was in Mangaluru doing that presentation. And that's the phenomenon. And the fourth is the sensors. Everything can be sensed today, whether it is touch, whether it is speed, whether it is pressure, whether it's temperature, whether it is images. Even when you take a picture, you see all those square things which come on faces. How does it recognize it's a face? That's the power of technology. And because of sensors, everything, including the way we work, is changed because of sensors. Whether it's access, whether it is the CCTVs, completely it has changed. And technology has changed everything, including how even investigations happen. In the past, when theft or murder or anything happened, the police used to bring a dog and show the handkerchief, and then the dog would lead the police to wherever it is, wherever the thief was or the murderer was. But now they look at CCTV images, they look at cell phone data, and they see where the cell phone was and whether the cell phone itself was in the zone at the point in time where the murder took place or the theft took place. And then they're able to zero in on the culprit. Look at the power today in terms of technology. And even evidence which we rely on in audit could be digital evidence. Today, in a COVID situation, one is able to do audits and sign off. Most of the audits are complete and signed off by auditors across the country. Huge banks, financial institutions, consumer companies, etc. How did the inventory verification happen? All using technology and images. We are able to do that again because of the speed, the storage, the sensors, whole host of things. That is the power. So we must recognize that the first biggest disruptor, I use the word disruptor because it's going to disrupt us, is technology. And it therefore means that we need to ask ourselves these questions. How will it impact us? How will it affect the processes within the business? Over what time scale? The question I'm still is how, not when. Or if is gone, it will definitely impact us. How will it affect the competencies which are needed? It has not only impacted our work, it has changed our behaviors. But there are two things we must remember about technology. The first is, don't fear technology. It is a reality. You have to learn to live with it. And if you don't adapt to it, you will be in the Jurassic Park of professionals. And the second is, don't be technology myopic. Don't be short-sighted about technology. Don't say, oh, this can never happen. By the time if you live in that world, you will find the pace of change has been so dramatic that you will be proved completely wrong. And the first one on technology phobia, most of us are guilty of it. We will say, oh, I don't know how to operate. My grandchild knows how to operate. But if your grandchild can operate, why can't you? Why can't you operate? And in this sort of a situation, how can one move forward if you have this phobia of technology or you are technology myopic? That is the threat which we need to be mindful of. And look at, apart from the four things I mentioned, look at all the other things, whether it is the spread of internet, whether it is cloud, whether it's big data which we talk of, 3D printing, renewable energy, Internet of Things, cognitive systems, nanotechnology, robotics, whole host of things. And this is even more and more, and we are not just in artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is very basic. Today, what you see in mobiles and other things, whether it is predictive text which you use, whether it is Amazon, whether it is Siri, whether it is Google which answers your question, that is still basic artificial intelligence. Then there is general intelligence, and there is artificial super intelligence. The progress which is happening today is almost like replicating the human brain. And when that happens, and with nanotechnology, you would see one of the items here is nanotechnology and robotics. Now, nanotechnology is making things smaller and smaller and smaller. Medical treatment will change with embedded devices in your body, which automatically communicates with your doctors. Robotics today in many hotels, newspapers, or room services done by robots. In that sort of a situation, even in my home during COVID, I ordered a robo which sweeps and swaps the house. It's a round device which goes around, maps the house, memorizes the whole thing, goes under chairs, tables, everything, and does it. Could I have imagined that? No, I didn't need a maid. It was able to do that. Now, if this is possible, you have to just imagine anything is possible. Autonomous vehicles is one of the items here, which is the driverless vehicles. Autonomous weapon systems. Driverless vehicles are becoming a reality. Next generation education. I mean, it is unbelievable when I can keep talking on technology and throw facts at you. So therefore, we need to imagine what then will our tomorrow look like. I like this quote which said, better be right about the trend and wrong about the implementation, and the other way around. So what are the headwinds apart from technology? I've spoken a lot on technology. I don't want to overdo on technology and tell you there are other things even beyond technology. The second most important thing is disintermediation, the principle of disintermediation. What does this mean? This means that all intermediaries will disappear. Take the travel agent. Years ago, when you needed to travel, you needed a travel agent. You had to go to a travel agent, you had to book a ticket. He booked a ticket, he issued a ticket in a certain format, and based on that, only you could travel. He got 9% commission. Today, where is that travel agent? You are automatically today getting onto the net, using your mobile, booking the tickets yourself. Where is the printed ticket? So he was an intermediary between you and the airline. You were the passenger and the airline needed to carry you. That intermediary disappeared. Now you ask yourself, if you are an intermediary, you will disappear if technology goes the way it is. We are already seeing this big time. And that is something which we must be mindful of. When we are doing this, we say, no, I am an expert. How will I be? My clients will want me, etc. What are the attributes of an expert? The first attribute of an expert is knowledge. Today, knowledge is at a press of a button. Knowledge is in Google. Today, even if I have to go to a doctor, I first Google, do everything, familiarize myself, then I ask the doctor. And I find he's giving me the same answers which are there in Google. That is the hard reality. And the problem with expert knowledge is today knowledge is universal. Everybody has access to the knowledge and everybody is therefore equated in a way. There used to be, when you visited a tax professional's office in the past, his office was lined up with all the AIR and ITRs, neatly bound, gold lettered, etc. Where are those today? Today it's a digital office in the way it is. And when it is a digital office, everybody is able to have that. And real time. Today a judgment is passed, real time it is put out, whether it is by Taxman, Tax Sutra, whoever it is. You have that instant, almost near real time in the way it is, and the full data. And that is something which we must be mindful of, that knowledge is not the differentiator. Then what happens, an expert says, oh, Google may give knowledge, but Google does not customize that knowledge. Google does not interpret and customize to you. Yeah, sure enough, when I was young, the tailor was an expert. He used to stitch my clothes. He was an expert because he would cut, measure, etc. and make something to my design, my requirements. And if he didn't deliver, I didn't have a Diwali. I didn't have new clothes. Now, what happens to that principle of customization? In came industrialization, and then the principle of mass customization happened. In the same tailor example, how many different pant lengths could be there? Inner length could be 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, whatever it is. A finite number. Today you go into a Marks and Spencer or any other store and look at your waist and look at your inner length and then buy. All those different options are there. How many different M&A models can be there? A fixed number. So there is this principle of mass customization. So the expert's second attribute of customization is also gone. Now in that situation, where do we as CA stand? We need to ask ourselves, are we intermediaries? So then the third attribute, which I will come later again, but let me make the point here, is an expert in many situations is the only person licensed to do a certain thing. Now what happened to the yellow black taxis who were the only ones licensed to ferry passengers? In came Uber, the passenger, and connected a passenger with somebody who had a car. And passenger today stands wherever he wants. The car will come to him, pick him up, and the type of car, and he pays a price which is predetermined in a way and goes. There's no haggling with the taxi guy. There is no taxi guy saying, I won't come. All those harassments are gone. And the exclusivity is gone. There is more, there is Ola, there is Uber, you've got multiple options. So there is that disintermediation, the intermediary completely disappears. And therefore, the exclusivity for an expert, which is another item there in my slide, which also means that we as CAs have to be mindful that imagine if something is only to be done by CAs and regulations change and that is not required to be done only by CAs. Poof, gone is your future. And there are many things like that. So you need to ask yourself, am I getting work because of a regulation? Am I getting work because I'm an expert and because of knowledge and ability to customize that knowledge? Can that be disrupted? If it can be disrupted because of by way of technology, it can be disrupted by many other mechanisms, then I need to be worried about. If I may give an extreme example, if the pujari in a temple is also an intermediary between you and God. So in all this corona or COVID, have you stopped praying? Have you stopped accessing God in some way? No. You went to the temple and he was the pujari. And you didn't go there to worship the pujari. So poor man, what happened to him today? He has no source of income. Nobody comes to the temple. Maybe he will be disrupted. And imagine if the same temple tomorrow was digital in the sense that it had a button outside. You press a button 24/7, like you go to an ATM to withdraw cash. And then a mantra comes out and then holy water comes. The same God, idol is there, same temple, same holy location. Just but without the pujari, would you be anyway dissatisfied? Perhaps no. Because you got used to an ATM which is no person there giving you cash and you're very happy to come out with the cash even at midnight. You don't want to see a bank manager or the bank cashier's face. That is gone. So this is the next threat, disintermediation. We as professionals have to be mindful of this threat of disintermediation. The third threat is the threat of Uberization. What did Uber do? It connected a passenger and an owner, correct? And similarly, it's very difficult to get Mr. Ramesh, to get a view from Mr. Ramesh. He's a very busy man. He has all his, he's fully booked. What if somebody were to just connect? You have a need. There is somebody who's willing to provide a service. How does it matter? Do brands matter? Do locations matter? Nothing matters. Timing matters. Two people are connected. So the profession can be disrupted by what we call Uberization of the profession. The question of having fancy offices, of having fancy titles, or having fancy brands may no longer be relevant. Leading from that is crowdsourcing. Technology is enabling crowdsourcing. Now, what do our clients want? Our clients want a solution. Now, supposing a client were to throw that solution into the crowd, because technology enables it. Anybody in the world who can provide him the solution, he'll pay him the fee. Why will he come to you in Mangaluru or me in Hyderabad or wherever it is? Why? So long as he gets the solution. And then issues of pricing come up. So then where is the competition? The competition is no longer between the large and the small or between A and B. It is the crowd. Crowd is competing. Technology has enabled that. And increasingly, we are finding even in WhatsApp groups, all these solutions are being provided. One CA helps another. And that's changing the way things are being done. So that's the fourth disruption. The fifth is commoditization. Everything is becoming a commodity because of all of these things, whether it's technology, etc. So increasingly, your fee levels will go down where the work is routine and can be automated. Now, some of these, when you see disintermediation or whatever it is, technology, take the most recent faceless assessment. Supposing you had great contacts in your income tax office in your city. All your clients came to you because you were the one who had great contacts, not necessarily great knowledge or ability to deliver, but the ability to get assessments done. Now with a faceless assessment, you don't know where it is done, how it is done, who is doing it, what happens to your contacts, how relevant will those contacts be. This is a threat, a real threat. And then therefore with commoditization, it means increasingly compliance work is vanilla. It can all be automated, e-filing of returns. In the good old days, we needed to have one person stand in the queue, one person doing photocopying, stapling, tying up everything, last day, last minute, you need that rubber stamp on the return. Now, where is that ecosystem? It is e-filing. Anybody can do it from anywhere. Isn't the CA being disrupted as far as that is concerned? And why would somebody pay you fancy fees for all of it? If it is as simple as an electronic filing, which you can do yourself. Removal of statutory requirement I spoke about, which is another disruption. If your work depends on a statute and the statute does not require you to do that work, then it is gone. Exclusivity, again arising out of only CAs can do. Already there is enough clamor from other professions saying, why can't we do the work which CAs are doing? Equally, CAs are saying, why can't we do work which others are doing? Now, if ATM can dispense cash, it is not licensed, it is not trained in dispensing cash, but it's automated. Similarly, all what you and I do can be done by machine. Then are you going to fight with the machine and saying, oh, it is exclusive, it is not pass CA exam? It is also doing accounting automatically, or it is filing your tax return automatically. Who cares whether you and I hold a CA degree? That is the real threat. If we are relying on removal on a statute and exclusivity, I think we have a bleak future. And then the one more very dangerous thing is what we call emergence of para-professionals. Today, increasingly, para-professionals are ruling. A nurse with the aid of technology is as good as a doctor. Any person with it, now look at the past. If I needed to test my blood sugar, I needed to go to a pathology lab, who would do the test, the results would come next day, same day, God knows. Today, what do? I prick myself, put it on a strip, get to know immediately my blood sugar level or my BP level. Now, am I a qualified doctor? No. With the aid of technology, I'm able to determine what is required. What happens to the pathologist? What happens to many things like that where there is a para-professional? Phenomenal. So an 8th class pass with technology today is as good as any professional. That is the hard reality organizations are realizing. So we need to be mindful of this para-professional. Increasingly, even yesterday I was part of an insolvency and bankruptcy committee chaired by Mohandas Pai, where we discussed on the introduction of para-professionals in the insolvency and bankruptcy space. Now, that is real. It will mean that they will be eligible to do work which professionals are able to do. What it means for professionals, you and I have to start worrying about. And lastly is cost pressures. With technology, things will become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Take your own mobile phone call costs, incoming calls, free. Outgoing call, in the past you were charged, somebody was charged for incoming call also as well as outgoing call. Then came a stage where incoming calls became free, then outgoing calls dropped to such a level where it's near free. And nowadays in many of the plans, calls are free. That's the hard reality. So if somebody is providing service using technology, why will it cost? It won't cost significantly. In the past, the whole billing was on man hours. I used 10 persons, spent 10 days, and therefore per day rate is so much, we used to bill so much. Oh, we have spent 8 hours, 10 hours. Today, if I can, using technology, if I can read 1 million contracts at a press of a button and get the distinctions in all those million contracts without having hundreds of people doing all that, those software are available. We use that in audit all the time to look at billions or millions of transactions and give us the test results at a press of a button. We do that even in all our search engines, in mobiles, everything. How much does it cost in terms of time? Nothing. So that will bring down the cost. So a professional using technology, another one not using technology will be driven out of business because of somebody who's using technology. He can charge much lesser, whether for him to process one item or to process 1 million items, the cost is the same. So the way of billing will no longer be on time basis. Time-based billing will get replaced by value-based billing. Or maybe clients today, when GST happened, most clients said, I don't want advice. I want a technology solution. Can you give me a technology solution together with not only advice, but updating it from time to time to enable me to comply with GST? Now, how do I charge the client? Maybe I have to have a licensing arrangement for the technology. So the whole business model of professionals will change. This is the reality. And if you don't believe this is the reality, you wait till technology engulfs all of us. And then you'll find that the traditional billing models will disappear. In the past, I don't know whether they do now, lawyers used to charge based on gold mohors. So many gold mohors, they would say, in the bill. How relevant is that today in today's world? So I've spoken about disintermediation, I've spoken about Uberization of the business, I've spoken about crowdsourcing, I've mentioned about paraprofessionals, I've talked about cost equalization, commoditization, as I said. Routine transactions, I will write your books of accounts. It's vanilla. It is automated. It will happen. The costs will drop lower and lower. Your fees will drop lower and lower. Somebody will be able to do mass on that scale and you will be out of business. So in summary, the profession which has enjoyed the barrier of exclusivity is threatened. The profession which has the bastion of expertise, as I give you all the attributes of an expertise, is threatened. Then affordability, now with cost dropping. So practically expertise is available at the click of a button. This is the reality. This is the future. And that is why I am concerned about this future, because I'm seeing the change which is happening. Why would somebody want to come to me if he can get all the answers otherwise? Even today, when a budget is given, by evening, everybody is getting an analysis of the budget big time. Look at this book, The End of Accounting. It's a research publication by Baruch Lev and Feng Gu. It almost says your annual reports are useless because nobody reads it. It compared the stock price movement for over 40 to 60 years, I think, on New York Stock Exchange with the release of the results. It found that the results did not affect the stock price at all. There was no correlation. They compared the top line, no correlation, change in top line, but no change in stock price. Changes in bottom line, nothing in stock, changes in operating profit, no change. Found that financial results are having no impact on the stock markets. Either stock market is getting the data from somewhere else, or your annual reports are not giving the required information which is relevant for decision making. And this is what the book concludes in a way, which is serious. If what we take pains to produce and get it audited is useless, where is the future? This is one. So therefore, this is the time we need to seriously introspect. And when we say seriously introspect, are we relevant? Why am I wanted? What worked in the past? Will it work in the future? The answer clearly is no. Why does a client come to me? Does he come to me because he likes me? Because my father served him? Because I'm located in Mangaluru? Because I have special knowledge? Because of the staff I have? Or because the law requires him to come to me only? Analyze that. And then say, what if that is gone? What if he can access anybody outside of, say, Mangaluru? What if he can access anybody who's not a CA and get the same thing at maybe 1/10 the price? What if the law does not require him to get a services of a CA for anything? And what if he goes to somebody else who's able to do it, as I said, at a lower price? And what happens? So the fact is, we never sit back and analyze why we are doing well. We assume we are doing well because, we are very knowledgeable. Yeah, last year I did well, this year I'll do 10% more or 20% more, I'll show growth. Not realizing where is it going to come from. We assume that the existing present will be there next year and will be better next year. Not realizing that the present may no longer be better next year. Ask yourself, compare 2020 with 2019. How different is 2020? In 2019, did you ever expect 2020 to be like this? No. We could not have imagined that 5 months you will sit at home. This is the reality. As Albert Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So each one of us should analyze the present first. How vulnerable are we? As I said, you will not get a single answer to what the future is and then say, here it is. The future for a person in geography A will be different for a future in geography B. The future for a person who has a certain level of expertise and doing a certain type of work will be completely different from a future from somebody who's doing a different type of work. The future for a person of a certain size will be different of the future for a person of a much different size, maybe larger or whatever it is. So you need to analyze how vulnerable are we? What are the gaps? Who are our competitors? You know, for automotive companies, the competitors for Toyota, the competitor is not General Motors, is not Mercedes-Benz. The competitors are Google, Tesla, others. They're computer companies, they're technology companies are the competitors. They're threatened by them. You ask them, they will say, technology. Even for us, technology is a competitor. What prevents India's top technology companies from doing accounting work? What prevents them from doing auditing work? Because after all, a lot of it can be automated and it is mined. So what prevents them? Just as the ATM example I gave. So are we really different? So what is unique about us? Which is why we are wanted. That we need to analyze. And then say, look at the future. Will it be the same game? Even in a game like cricket, what is test cricket? Who watches now? It's gone to 2020 now. It came to one day and then to 2020. And I don't know how the future of the game will be. Will it be a new game? Will there be new players? How will we fill the gaps? How will it happen? So there is no doubt this is the time for transformation. So then what if this is the situation? What will the future be? You need to look at it through the lens of a regulator, clients, community, employees, stakeholders, etc. But in substance, if you look at it, I would personally believe the power of brands will be irrelevant. If there can be crowdsourcing, you can be accessed anywhere. I think the power of a brand is no longer relevant. The loyalties are gone. Just because your grandfather, your father served a client, today's millennials will, at the drop of a hat, just like you and I have changed our mobile phones. I used to use Nokia. Today, I don't look at Nokia. I may be looking at Apple devices or maybe Android device. As I said, the future will be no exclusivity. There'll be a convergence of professions because there is that blurring of lines today. And unfortunately, I've been driving this message across the profession hard, saying, please look at your own rules and regulations. If I can't do work without technology, why can't I have a technology person as a partner? I will need to have, and that man would want a share in profits. You can't say CAs can't share profits with non-CAs. You can't have multidisciplinary firms. You can have all the restrictions and say only CA can do this. How will I function? And then, as I said, there's work which a CA can do, which others can do. There's work which others can do, which CA can also do. There will be, in my view, a convergence of professions, and what is needed also is a convergence of professions. In fact, there's a lot of talk about it. Because of resistance by all the three institutes in India, I'm sure that is not happening. But the fact is, if customers start driving that, he say, why do I need to go to a company secretary for a piece of work, CA for another piece of work, cost accountant? After all, many of them are also having combined qualifications. For that matter, when I go to a hospital, they're all MBBS, they're all MDs with different specializations, but they're all under the same hospital. If I have an orthopedic issue, I go to an orthopedic. If I have a neuro, I go to a neuro. So he says, why can't everybody be in one profession? They're all part of a medical profession. They're all with the Medical Council of India. So why can't there be this sort of a thing in a professional world like ours? If you really look at it closely, perhaps the answer is yes. And I had spoken to you about disappearance of intermediaries, demise of audit. I personally believe a few years from now, audit may become irrelevant. It's already become irrelevant for different reasons, or rather risky for different reasons. And more work for paraprofessionals. I've spoken on all of this. Real-time client interface. Clients want speed, 24/7 access. Overnight, they want the answers because that's possible with technology. He'll send you a mail. He'll say, have you looked at the mail? He'll send you WhatsApp, instant, what alerts come in. People today, if somebody is waiting in my reception and comes to me and I proudly say, this is the decision. He'll say, sorry, sir, when I was in the reception, CBDT issued a circular. This is the new law. I'm outdated because I was busy doing something in my office. He gets an alert on his mobile. Maybe that's how it is. The reality is most people believe they're doing great work, but the clients don't believe so. Only 8% of the clients, as the study says it is. So we must be prepared as a profession to move away from regulatory driven work. Don't go and keep asking the profession institute to say, get us more regulatory work, get us more this thing, more branch audit, mandate it, because it means more profession. What about the customer? Look at branch bank audits. With the same private sector banks don't have the hundreds of auditors which nationalized banks have. They have thousands of branches. It's the same technology platform for both. So the nationalized banks are saying, why do I need audit at every branch when a private sector bank does not require? And is it that there are all frauds only in private sector and not in public sector? We can have different views. But I am only talking of the customer mindset. And if technologies enable one to do an audit sitting in one place, just like how we are doing audits today without going to office, what does it mean for all the branch audits and bank branch audits? What does it mean for the revenue for the professionals and profession itself? So that work beyond, we have to think of moving beyond regulatory related work, and people will leave and go. So if you stick to it and say it has to be only done by CS and only by this, you will have no future. We need to align with the market in this. So therefore, I see a shift from compliance to advisory. Mohandas Pai said this. He absolutely was right, bang on it when he said, you need to be more advisory. You need to say, what does a customer want? Why can't I provide what he wants? If he wants his business to be successful, you should go to him with how you can make his business successful. Not go to him and say, no, I am required to do audit because this law says this. I will help you file the tax return. I will do this compliance work for you. Compliance will be vanilla. How will you ensure he's successful? Think on that. We CAs have those skills, but we need to partner with others to be able to provide that multidisciplinary. He says, I don't want to go for an M&A transaction with a lawyer for something, to a valuation professional for another thing, for tax structuring to a tax specialist, for audit to another person. I want everything under one roof. So that is where we need to shift towards, in a way, a multidisciplinary firm. I see that we need to partner with other professions. And I'm seeing this as a huge risk in terms of what it is. So therefore, what we should do, this is my last slide, consolidate. As an individual, I can't be everything. There are limitations. Here, I'm not on what is right and what is wrong. I am on, if you want to be extremely successful, there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm happy with where I am. I'm happy with what revenues I have. I'm okay. Nothing wrong. If you're happy, fine. But remember, you can be disrupted. If you are doing a certain type of work, as I said, which is regulatory driven, you can go. But if you are consolidated with others, 5 fingers can lift something better than 1 finger can do. 2 hands can do something which 1 hand can do. So you are resilient. You're stronger. You are able to provide a wide variety of service. Your client will remain with you because you are able to render all those services, all the 5 fingers which are able to do. Not just one. Otherwise, he will say, why do I need to come to you? You need to be technology literate and proficient. I've said this time and time again, and focus on building a multidisciplinary firm. Means all other skills have to come in. And therefore, it will mean to begin with alliances and partnerships in some way. If you have to consolidate, if you don't want to straight away merge whatever it is, start building alliances and partnerships and connections so that the client can get that service, a multidisciplinary service through you. And focus on what value you are delivering, not how much it costs you and how much time you spend. Who cares for how much time you spend? Peter Drucker said, quality in a product or thing is not how difficult to make or how much time is put in. It's what the customer gets out of it. And if you have to be mobile as individuals, you can't expect that I'll be in a place like, say, Rajamandri and expect a shower of opportunities to happen where I'm standing. It can't happen. Or in Shimoga, the shower of professional opportunities. If you want to have financial services expertise, insurance, you may need to move from Shimoga to maybe Mumbai. And it needs continuous learning and updating, including learning on technology and other things. And we need to say what is risky. Don't get into high risk work, because as professionals, what matters is our reputation. Our reputation once disappears, then it takes years to rebuild. Nobody will come to us. And do not depend. And I say, whilst you may be doing today, do not exclusively depend on statutory work and operate within the boundaries of regulation. Be of high integrity. I've driven home a lot of these principles. Think, introspect using those principles and say, where am I? If this is all what is happening, what should I do? Some of those messages are all here. How do I consolidate? Look around you. Who are the others who are doing other things? Somebody may be a GST specialist, I may be a direct tax specialist. Combined, you are able to then serve your client better together with a technology person. A huge thing, and these are some of the things. Thank you very much for a very, very patient listening, and I'd be happy to take any questions, and I'll request the organizers to moderate the questions and help me with it.
Because we just went through your PPT and you said that we have to, understand what we do, how we do, when we do, and where we do. To add on, we also have to change ourselves and adapt ourselves to technology. It is said, if we change before the change, we will lead. If we change with the change, we will survive. But we don't change even after the change, then we will collapse. So we have to understand what we are in the profession, and change ourselves and adapt ourselves to the technological changes. Thank you very much, sir. I now request the chairman of Udupi branch of SIRC of ICAI, CA Pradeep Jogi, to propose the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. John Maxwell says, and I quote, "A pessimist complains about the wind. Optimist tries to change it, and a leader adjusts the sails." The sails for this particular notion were adjusted by a person who is not only a great motivation to all of us, but a visionary and the person who gave us the belief to bring together this Golden Jubilee celebration. Respected SS Nayak, CA SS Nayak, Chairman of Mangalore branch, Secretary CA Abdul Rahman Muspa, all the managing committee members, past chairman of Mangalore branch and Udupi branch, members, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this session. Udupi branch was part of the Mangalore branch before the formations of Udupi branch in the United Dakshina Kannada district. At the outset, I must congratulate the members of the Mangalore branch on the Golden Jubilee Foundation Day. My hearty felicitations to the chairman of Mangalore branch, CA SS Nayak, and managing committee members, all the predecessors and members on this joyous occasion, and wish that Mangalore branch to scale greater heights in future. On behalf of the Mangalore branch, Udupi branch, and Shivamogga CPE chapter of SIRC of ICAI, a very hearty vote of thanks to CA PR Ramesh sir for enlightening the members with the topic Future of Profession and CA Firms. We would also like to acknowledge CA PR Ramesh sir, our esteemed speaker, who took the time out of his busy schedule and showered us with his pearls of wisdom and knowledge. We are truly humbled by your presence, sir. Thank you once again. It was a very insightful session, sir. I also thank CATV Mohandas Pai sir for sharing with us his insights, opinions, and experience today on the topic New Avenues for Chartered Accountants. On behalf of the Mangalore branch, Udupi branch, and Shivamogga CPE chapter, I thank the torchbearers of our institute, President of ICAI, CA Atul Kumar Gupta sir, and Vice President CA Nihar and Jambusaria in absentia to inaugurate the celebrations and address the members and students of the Mangalore, Udupi, and Shivamogga district. I also thank CA Dayanima Sharma sir, Central Council member of ICAI, coordinator for this 2 half-day virtual CPE meeting. Thank you, sir, for all your support. Also thank the SIRC chairman, CA DC Jain, and treasurer of SIRC, CA Geeta Yabi, for their presence. I thank all the members and students who have participated overwhelmingly, making this event a grand success. Ladies and gentlemen, an event like this cannot happen overnight. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated members, students, and volunteers. I thank all the volunteers who ran around doing a lot of things. Thank you so much. I would like to take this opportunity to place on record a hearty thanks to CA SS Nayak, Chairman of Mangalore branch, and also all the managing committee members for giving me this opportunity. Thank you one and all.
particular vote of thanks. We thank you also for being a part of this show. Indeed, a very eventful Tuesday which has enlightened us all, and another memorable day in the Golden Jubilee. So we'll be having another knowledge-packed day of Golden Jubilee tomorrow, where we'll be having CA Dr. Girish Ahuja, a renowned author, who will be addressing on the A to Z of capital gains, and CA Dayanara Sharma, the Central Council member of ICAI, who will address on revised peer review guidelines. So we'll have the day 2 of Suvarna Sambhrama with us in the Mangalore branch today. The celebrations will go on, and having the chief guests like CAK Ullas Kamath, Joint MD of Jyoti Labs, the guest of honor CA Raghavendra Rao, past Secretary SIRC of ICAI, special invitee CA Dr. Abhishek Murli, Secretary of SIRC of ICAI. So as I already said, it will be a knowledge-packed session. 2 hours of CPE also will be there. So let us all meet again. 3 hours of CPE credit will be available to all the delegates. So do watch this virtual CPE meet and take advantage of the sessions and enjoy the Golden Jubilee. Thank you once again. This is CA Yashashwini signing off. Thank you.